All right, and we are live. This is fantastic. I'm actually really excited about this one. Um, Hopefully, we have some people hopping on because it's awesome. I'm really excited about who we get to talk to today and kind of geek out about the the behind the scenes, the nitty gritty, if you will, the creative behind the creative, from writing to um, the cinematography, direction, photography, the sound and score. Those are really huge elements of Fragment that um, I'm excited to talk about. That we don't get to talk about a lot, just because we've been talking to the cast so much. Um, but if you're in this industry, the writing, the shooting, and the scoring of a feature tells so much of the story, and Fragment has such deep tones all throughout that I'm really excited to talk with these guys. So we've got Adam Beck, who was the director of photography, and then Jared Lane, who's the composer. So they're going to come on, and I'm excited to talk with them to kind of geek out about that stuff a little bit. Um, but first, I wanted to add this just because I can. It's not my show, but it's my show, I guess is the best way to say it. I don't know. Before we go any further, if you're on, please tell me where you're from. Uh, Leave comments, questions. I want to show them. These guys have so much information and knowledge that if you've got questions, I would love for them to be able to answer them for you. So please do that. Tell me where you're watching from. That's cool too. I think we've got it over like 3 or 4 different platforms, so it's always good to know where everybody's coming from. Um, so I'm gonna do this because, um, well, quite frankly, I'm really proud. So, um, Fragment Oblivion has been nominated in every category that we could at International Christian Film Festival. So we've been nominated for Best Show or Series, Best Trailer, their first trailer that came out. Mark was nominated as Best Lead Actor, and Isabel was nominated as Best Lead Actress. So we're like, you know, we're looking forward to a really great show. It's an award nominated show, hopefully award winning, but we won't know that till May, which is after when the show actually comes out. And in case you haven't been paying attention, Fragment of Oblivion comes out on PureFlix March 16th. So go get it. Um, March 16th. Go break PureFlix's computer and let's see if we can get ourselves ready for a season 2. So, all right, let's bring in the stars of the show, if you want to call them that. They probably don't get called the stars of the show very often, but I'm going to call them the stars of the show because they're awesome. So I'm going to bring in Adam, who is our director of photography, and Jared, who is our composer. Hey, gents, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. You guys sound like the post crew or the behind the camera crew. Like you're like guys are like good. I've had other people be like, yeah, no, this is great. It's so excited to be here. And you guys are like, yep.
Good to go. Yeah. Do it again. Oh,
Awesome.
yeah.
All right. So I wanted to congratulate you guys too. The best series element is kind of belongs to all of us. Benji and Jonathan and Kenzie, who did hair, makeup, wardrobe. Michael, who did all of our set design. Um, we had a small crew, but we worked really hard. And then to Excelsior Studios, who did the post sound, and Jared, who did the score. Like that belongs to all of us, right? All of our PAs, all the people who showed up to help out. My wife, who fed us so wonderfully. Um, you know, I wish. Jared and you and I have talked about this. I wish some of the Christian awards would expand into some of these other areas a little bit further, and they would give awards for series cinematography, series editing, series directing, and scoring, because you want to bring up the quality of what we're doing. Man, celebrate the ones that are doing a tremendous job. So I nominated you. It didn't go very far, but I just want you guys to know I did nominate you. I did tell them that you guys deserve an award for your work.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you actually don't. I mean, the words are nice, I guess, in the sense of affirmation of what you're doing, but it's really being on set and doing what you love that's the payoff.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, way to take the high road there. That's awesome. After all that setup, you decided to just take the high road. That's good. That's nice. That's nice.
It's also
all right. So let me do this. I want to start with this because we've talked a little bit, but maybe each of you give me just like a quick synopsis of how you got into this. We talked the other day. We did an interview, and you guys had talked about kind of the why, which is really cool. But I'm just kind of curious some of the background of like what motivated you into it, how you got into it, because this is two very different ends of the spectrum, right? And they're so interdependent. Great cinematography inspires great score highlights great cinematography, and Fragment is a tremendous example of what has happened when you guys are both working the way you do. So I'm kind of curious, Adam, why don't you start kind of just again brief how you guys got into this?
Well, I think it's actually had an uncle that had a video store, and when I was a kid, so we'd go rent movies like every weekend. But he happened to have a VHS camcorder when I was like 12 years old, and we took it on vacation one year, borrowed it from him, and I was just kind of outside, just roaming around, bring it really low behind like car tires, and thinking, wow, like this actually looks like it's an animal's like point of view. Like there's something creepy about this. So that kind of sparked something, and I've always kind of remembered that. But it took a while before I really kind of jumped into the business, and so it wasn't this, I wasn't making short films when I was since 3 or anything like that. But yeah, I think just the visual side of just how you compose something and things like that just draws your attention. And so yeah, is that short enough? I can go longer, but
that was so much. What was your first job on set? Did you dive right into director of photography, or did you work your way up a little bit?
That's tough. I don't quite remember, actually. I did a short film with my brother and my dad once, and that was interesting because my brother played the same character. He played like a copy of himself, so that was interesting. And there's certain things about it that, after that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to take a break because I didn't do a very good job. So, just because you're like, man, this is not this is not easy. So it's, I kind of remember that was, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe. No, it's got to be more than that. It's going to be a long time. Wow. It has to be a really long time. Yes, I don't know. That's hard. I mean, I there's certain things that drive you and stuff, like going to movies and see, what was the first movie you saw? I was E.T. in the theater. So, it's always there. It just, for me, it was kind of just get to certain points. Like, I really love this. Like there's certain aspects of telling stories, and that's interesting. And putting the camera there to help tell that story is so important. Sometimes it's lost and what you're supposed to do. So, I sometimes tell this I read an article a little while ago, probably during the pandemic, and it is from a 1941 article in the ASC magazine, or American Cinematographer magazine, which is published by the ASC. And it talked about Gordon Wiley's talking about Forced Landing. That's a movie he directed. And he was talking at the time, sound just came in. And so he was complaining that, except for Citizen Kane, everybody quit using the camera to tell stories because they had so much with sound and things of that nature. And they kind of just became lackadaisical. Not lackadaisical, but I think sometimes we get enamored with new technology and we're like, oh, technology will solve our problems. And it really doesn't. So it can help us. Yeah, absolutely. But, putting the camera where it's supposed to go to help tell a story is super important.
Yeah, I agree. So, Jared, before I get to you, I wanted to let people know we had Mike Rinaldi. Am I saying that right? I think I am.
Yes, that's correct.
Across town from Adam. Do you know Mike?
Yes,
Adam?
I know Mike well.
Okay, that's good. It's because he's watching from across town. That felt kind of stalkerish. Like, like across town, we'll just get these notifications down the street from outside his window. I'm in his room. Like it'll just like constantly get closer to you. And then Jonathan Weinstead or Weinstein. I'm sorry if I don't say that right. From Buffalo, New York. That's awesome.
Cool.
Man,
Sweet.
Buffalo. Whew. That's up there. All right. Brooklyn Whitmer is always watching. I don't know where she's watching from this time, but she's always here, which is fantastic. Gina is watching. Thank you for that. I appreciate you guys showing up. That makes it easier for us to feel like we're not just talking to each other, even though we probably would. So that's all. All right, Jared. So give me how you got into this thing.
So I got into this, I feel like in a fairly traditional way. Like I started studying music a lot in high school and stuff. I got into music through musicals and ended up liking doing the music more than the acting. And so that's kind of how I got into music. And I went from wanting to teach to realizing that everyone in college came to me to ask me questions about music theory in class and stuff. So I just kind of realized I had a knack for that. And then I met a producer in Greenville when I was in college. Then I realized I could have an orchestra in my computer. And so then I was like, oh, this could be really cool. So then I started going the film route and teaching myself how to do it through YouTube and how to use programs like Logic and Pro Tools and stuff. And then I went and studied with a film composer at grad school to really learn the ropes. And so then I've just been kind of learning more and more and doing it more and more. And that's how it happened. So
nice.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. You and I, we have such a strange connected background in that. So I teach film and photography at a homeschool program called Artios. Jared's mom started Artios and he graduated the year before I started teaching, to show you how old I am. And so I had been working with Mike Flack, who was doing score, and then we moved. There were some things that kind of went where Mike was like, I think I might work this direction. And so on our last film, Stealing the Show, I was like, I need a composer. And so I started listening to Jared's stuff and we started talking, and he sent over, I remember, do you remember the very first score you sent me?
I do.
For Stealing the Show? It was so bad.
It was not good. That is for sure.
It was like you admitted, you were like, okay, yeah, no, that's not right. I realized I had been working on this like children's thing, and you were like, I couldn't get out of it. So he made this kind of initial score, and it
did not work. I'm surprised you didn't have to go to the hospital. So
I had faith, but it became one of those things where Jared's skill set, the way he saw score and stuff, I was like, yeah, I see the film the same way. And so we've had a really good working relationship. And that's why I keep telling people, I was like, he's under contract. Adam and Jared are under contract to me for like 10 years. They don't know it.
Yeah.
But that's just the way it works. So it was fun. And Jared's brother, Jordan, is the director of the Artios campus that I teach at. So you were calling me the other day while I was with him. And I was like, why is your brother calling me? This is not good. I don't like it when Jared calls me. It terrifies me, especially when we're supposed to be delivering something. So, all right. So I got a question. Here's another question I'm curious about. Now we know how you kind of got into it. When it came to Fragment, what was your guys' thought process arriving at, this is kind of what I want it to look like. This is kind of what I want it to sound like. I know that I would give some basics in terms of what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing, but how did you guys kind of arrive at some of those decisions while working on it? Jared, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So like you had made a mood board of a playlist, and we kind of use that as a starting ground of not necessarily talking about the themes in them, but just kind of like this is the color palette that you kind of envisioned for Fragment. Once I got the script, I think I read the script probably 5 or 6 times, getting a feel for the character arcs of each character, because I write very thematically, and so I started working on the characters' themes about like 3 weeks before I ever got the first episode, and finding my way in it that way. And so that was probably the main way I got into it, was making sure that these themes, and then I wrote like a suite for each of those themes to make sure that the theme itself could encompass the story arc of each character. So that way I knew it could get us through all 6 episodes, and was diverse enough and versatile enough to be, Ariah's theme had to be action, it had to be sad, it had to be suspenseful. John's theme had to be all of those. Cody's and Linux's theme had to be able to work in all of those situations. And so I think doing that experimentation just before I got episode 1, and then really like polishing that through episodes 1 and 2 was probably how I got it to sound the way I thought it should sound. And the other thing was, we talked about sci-fi thrillers tend to have scores that to me, that made them feel a little small. There's suspense, they're low, they're brooding, whereas we wanted this to feel bigger. So that's why the orchestra played a huge role. And so a lot of like the tools and the harmony choices came from fantasy rather than like sci-fi thriller. And I think that helped make it feel much more adventurous than just straight thriller.
Yeah, I remember sitting down and I was watching it, and I told my wife, I says, even as I'm editing this thing, even as I'm sitting and watching playback, I'm hearing the score, I'm seeing the visuals, and I'm like, I feel like I'm watching the movie, somebody else's thing, and I just get to enjoy it. And yet it's like this pick your own adventure. I can be like, yeah, no, but I want to see this now, and I can change the movie. But it was such a surreal moment, and the score elevated so many things as well. So Adam, what about you? How did you kind of get there? And before we do, Jonathan had a really cool statement about respecting good cinematography, but it's not a skill set, and it does add so much. I just feel like, especially in the Christian space, cinematography and score have been neglected, and we've gone backwards a little bit, where it's been kind of like Adam, you were talking about after Citizen Kane, just get the shot and kind of move on, without the, why are we doing this with the camera? Why are we doing this with the light? Why are we doing this with the sound? What else are we saying about it? So, so I'm curious kind of how you arrived.
Well, very similar, Jared, is I read the script several times, so 4 or 5 times going through it. Then I go through and I start making technical notes or questions for you. And we had a call like, hey, what are you asking, what you thought it should look like? What you think, camera movement, things of that nature. Kind of got your taste for how you envisioned this. And then kind of took that back, and you kind of asked, hey, would you do the shot list? Which is something that I don't get asked very often to do. But I loved it, because to me, it brought me so much more into the story, because the idea is to tell the story with a camera. And where am I putting that camera for this part of the scene? How does it help conveying the emotions of the characters? And so I had a blast. Did we do everything that I don't? No, absolutely not. You don't, it's a plan, right? Plans are, if you don't, what is it? You don't plan to fail, or something like that. But, we go on set and things change, and that's okay. You want things to change. You want to be able to pivot off someone's performance, or maybe it's a location issue and we have to just punt and go shoot it somewhere else. And then you're a different type of problem solving. But the idea is still there, is you're there to tell a story. So
Right.
you may not get to shoot it how you envisioned in your head, but at the same time, the story is what's you've kind of set out as what you're trying to tell. So
well, and when we would think through it, I mean, you and I could probably come up with grandiose schemes for cranes and all these amazing shots, but the nature of it, and I remember you said this to me, and it stood out. It wasn't trying to do anything but capture moments. We were trying to capture a moment. This is the moment we need right now, and so. It was fun to watch, and be like, we would have conversation and I'd be like, okay, what are you thinking next? And we would dialogue. And then every once in a while I'd throw in like, hey, can we grab this? Cause I could see the edit as we're working.
Sure.
And be like, I think I'm going to want to grab this little cut in here. Or, and at the pace and the crew were working, it was kind of like, if we had twice the time, right, we could be way more fine with stuff, but we had to find this balance between being extremely creative and also staying productive, which is a challenge on set for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a time I kind of have a saying that says time on set, time's the killer of all things. So, when you don't have the time, you're left making decisions that you may not want to make, but you're forced to do it. So that's kind of part of the business, right? So
yeah, I agree. So I'm curious. I get asked this a lot, and I'd be interesting what your guys' response would be. Do you guys have a style? It's such a broad-based question, right? It's kind of like, do you have a style of directing? Yes, I tell them what I want, and then I say action. I don't know what style that might be. Somebody else could probably infer the style upon me, but I don't know if there's something a viewpoint you have, or maybe an influence that you're like, I love X, Y, and Z people or whoever, and that I think has influenced. For me, I'm a kid of the '80s, right? So I grew up with Star Wars and I grew up with Spielberg. And I didn't realize how much of an influence the way Spielberg told stories was on me until I started realizing how much I like J.J. Abrams films. And it was literally Super 8 that I was like, man, I just love this. And then I started watching some of the behind the scenes, and Spielberg's there on set, and Abrams was like, I love this guy. And I was like, oh, I do too. And I didn't even know it. Like, my favorite film was a Spielberg film, but I didn't realize how instrumental he was. And then I also didn't realize how instrumental John McTiernan was to how I do stuff. I just was like, wow, that hit me, and I didn't even realize it. So I'm curious, do you guys have that?
Right,
have a style or an influence?
Jared,
you've been thrown under the bus.
Okay. I like, when I would dream about composing, I thought I would have a style, and I thought I knew what it was. And then I did doing the show and realized that a film composer's job is to maybe have a process of how I do it, but to be able to change his style, his or her style, to fit the film. And so, I mean, I think that like the thought process of how I go about things is influenced by kind of like the OG composers, if you will, of like Max Steiner and Elmer Bernstein and those guys, and through that, Williams, and just storytelling that way through themes is probably the closest thing I could say to the style and stuff like that. And like for example, Araya's theme came about through doing a lot of studying of one particular sci-fi princess's theme. And
who I don't
I don't know. It's from some big Star Wars like War and Stars franchise. I don't know, but so those
or
are
that
the
little
influences.
project, that little thing over there. Yeah.
Yeah, that little thing. So, but yeah, I guess that's all I can say about that. I mean, Fragment is definitely more in my wheelhouse
Mm,
in terms of the sound. It's just where I'm really comfy, but the style does change with every project.
okay, I got
Yeah.
you. What about you, Adam?
Well, I think style is kind of somewhat based upon your experiences and your own taste and things you like. But at the same time, I feel like as a DP, we're chameleons. It's like we're adapted to the stories because the stories are different. And you know, I've heard this before. Like with lighting, there's no such thing as bad lighting, just inappropriate lighting, like lighting that's not for the scene, that's maybe for something else.
Mm,
So you could take a light and shine on someone's chin, and it gives that scary light, and that's perfect for a horror film. But if you're doing a romantic comedy, that doesn't really work, does it? So
right.
yeah, and so I would say that is it's our taste, but I think it's also just how the material really speaks to us. But my boss is you in this project, so
Right.
it's a lot like what you want. So it's like, oh, hey Nathan, do you like this? So
Well, and I think in that situation, it was comforting to know that I didn't have to worry about the visuals as much, right? Like I've shot so much of what I've done, and I realized that I have a preferences when I shoot. I'm more color motivated. I like a hard rim light. Those are just, for some reason, that's just how I see it.
yeah,
And I think it was started during Stealing the Show, part of Scion, where I started to go, okay, these are things that I enjoy looking at. They're the ones that I go to when I'm, if you're looking through a bunch of stills, I tend to go to the more heavy contrast, stronger color sets, even wider scope shots. They fascinate me, and so as well as movement, and so that's influenced me as a cinematographer. It's influenced me as a writer. It's influenced me as somebody who directs, and how to try and like, oh, what could we do to tell this story? And so when we would have conversations, I would look at your reel and we would talk through it. It was comforting to be able to say, okay, I don't have to stress about what that looks like. And I could just kind of watch you work. And then every once in a while be like, hey, what if we did this? Is that a possibility? Because as a writer, you're thinking really big, right? And so it's like, how big can I make this within the budget we don't have, but I still got to make it feel like it's gigantic. And so, as I would go out and location scout, I'd be like, okay, this location feels cinematic, and I know that when Adam gets to it, it's gonna translate well. I'm not gonna have to stress about the translation of this location. I just want to give you as much, room to play with as I could, and so yeah, I don't know where that's going, but that's this thought that I think is lost a lot of times in the film, in the production, right? It's the director's thinking through something, but at the end of the day, you've got to really be able to trust the people that you're working with to execute even better than what you can pull off. So so there's that, bit of information. We've got a lot of people who love Super 8, which makes me feel really good. That's we've got and Gina loves Super 8, right? Because it's awesome. Jesse loves Super 8 because, again, awesome. I'm assuming that Michaela loves Super 8. She just says same here. And so I'm just going to throw that into the Super 8 love moment. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to throw it all together. So I don't want to get too far before I do this. I've tried to give some sneak peeks at the show in different areas. So your work has been seen there, but I wanted to kind of give it in a different perspective where we're focusing in on specific aspects. So I wanted to start with a score piece, Jared, and you had talked about Ariah's theme, and there's two score elements that we'll hear. One is going to be from episode 3, which is one of my favorites, it also has this very Williams-esque tone to it. Like I heard it and I was like, that's John Williams. That's what is what that is.
Yeah.
And then the second one is from episode 6. And it's this really kind of intense action moment in the episode. But what I loved is there was such diversity in the score pieces, and then the way that it resolved, it was just it struck me every time. So it's a bit long, but I don't think anybody's going to care because it's pretty. So I'm gonna play that.
All right.
And so we can kind of get kind of what you've done from a score standpoint. So let me go ahead and add that in there.
Sweet.
That was the end of that, I guess.
There we go.
I'm supposed to have more to it, but there's this thing you did at the end of this piece that goes from this kind of intense element into this kind of heroic resolution piece that was just like every time I watch it, it gives me a little bit of goosebumps. I'm just like, that was just there was so much depth to it, right? And you've been able to capture the scope we were going for, right? Which was this, and I kept saying, I was like, I want it to feel huge. It has to feel gigantic. And you were able to do that and elevate so much of what we were doing to this other level. And then the subtext that comes in. I think that's the other side of score work that gets mixed is the additional storytelling piece and subtext that could be going on, the misleading that could be happening, or the telling of an additional story. I've always thought of it as a character. And so, why don't you talk about that a little bit? The kind of the idea of subtext in scoring.
So, I feel like a score has like 2 or 3 main purposes, like the first thing you have to do is you have to just fit the scene, right? It has to fit the scope of the scene. It has to fit the emotion of the scene, has to follow the scene, develop with it. The other thing it has to do is it has to say everything that the lines aren't, and stuff, because, and to get into what's really going on inside people's heads and stuff, and what the meaning of the action is. Because I think a lot of times you can have this action scene, and that's all it is it's just action. It looks cool. But all action scenes and all action music should be telling the story, and almost every major action thing in Fragment, some character has to make a huge choice.
Right.
Like I can't think of one where there isn't a huge character development moment in the action. And that's where the themes come in, right? So even though it's action, the themes are still on top of it. And going through it, because like in that example, I think 3 or 4 of the character themes are in that one. Araya's theme is in it.
Be careful, don't give too much information. No spoilers.
No, but like there's a lot of themes in there. And that's why when the part that wasn't in what we showed, when it changes moods, we've just heard the theme go through this really intense dissonant thing, and now it's this whole other feel, and that's why that's so impactful afterwards. So
yeah, I agree. And you know, and it plays, it's almost like and that's why it's fascinating to talk with you guys, because there's such subtext between the score that's going on to the camera movement, the color choice, the lens choice that continues to tell the story. That's not just what the actors are saying or doing on camera, but it's all the little other nuances. You know, so like Adam, we would talk, and you didn't move the camera a ton, right? There wasn't like we had this giant track all the time. I would probably shoot that way because I'm fascinated by it. But there was these intentional moments of movement, intentional moments of let's get this one shot and angle. And it was always interesting. I mean, how were you using lighting and camera movement and lens choice as a part of that storytelling structure and subtext?
Well, I think that anything you do with intention, or you should do it with intention. So if it's going to move, if the camera's going to move, why is it moving? And a lot of times it's, you know, sometimes it's, you know, kind of dictating pace of the scene, but it's really to kind of, there, I would say there's, people have an idea of how camera should move. I saw a book that was written in the 60s. It's 300 pages just on camera movement. And you're like, like, you read, and then I've read older stuff, and they totally contradict each other. Like it really is subjective. Your own, what does it make you feel? And I think that, you know, for me, that's kind of that my style per se, what I feel, but it's also what the script's telling me. And so, or how it makes me feel, or how would I see that in my head? And, but I would say like one of the scenes that, you know, that we have, that it was like our day ones, and you know, and I thought, okay, we shoot this angle, shoot this angle, shoot this angle, and you're like, no, let's just do it a oneer, and we'll just start on this character, and then we'll just pan through the room, and we'll end on the second character. I don't know if I can say the name, so I don't want to give it away, but you know, then we had to, you know, a lens flare, because we had a window, the room is hazed, it's looks absolutely great. I don't think a pan, like what, you know, and then we do a rehearsal, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. And you know, it just set the pacing, the mood of that scene just kind of tied in because of that pan. And so, and I think that's, you know, you have to have the idea that you don't know everything, and that you have an idea, and that's what makes you feel. But when, you know, it's a collaboration, you're saying, hey, I'm envisioning this. You're like, okay, let's try that. And then you go back and go, oh wow, yeah, that you're right. That's perfect actually. And so, but I think in that scene, it's just because that pan just really had that patience. You got the dialogue, and then you ended on the response of the character that you were looking for. And that's just all tied together. So
yeah, I almost selected that scene as one of our clips, but I was like, I don't know, I don't want to give anything away, but it was such a fun thing to watch. I was geeking out for my end and be like, he can actually pull it off. All the things that are in my head, Adam can actually do. Oh, he's not limited by my inability to do stuff like I am. This is fantastic. This is comforting for me.
And I think we kind of, you know, going into that scene, which we won't see it, but because I think at the last episode of the series, I believe that scene is right. So, you know, that's like an HMI coming through the window, and then we got an aperture bulb in the corner of the room, and then we have a bounce board and haze, and that's it. And sometimes you don't need, you know, a bunch of lights and a bunch of rigging and all that stuff. Sometimes you do, but in this case, this kind of fit within our budget and what we needed to get done. It worked out perfectly. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see which you know, the shots you chose, because, you know, that was one of my favorites, but I have quite a few of them. So, but.
Well, yeah, tell me about some of your favorites without spoiling and stuff, but tell me some of your favorites.
Well, I think that day one was actually pretty fun. That scene, and then there's a chase scene with Isabel, and this location you got, which I think was a museum.
Yeah.
And that last scene where she's stuck between these two lens flares, right? And you have this look like I have no way out, and then I don't want to give me away, but it was just like that moment. That day of shooting was crazy. It was cold. It was because we ended up
Oh,
outside.
stupid.
But her running down the tracks and things like that, that looked great. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That was an interesting day. We were finishing when we were about ready to wrap. This is the reality of film production, right? And scheduling. We wrapped finishing up the chase scene that we shot on day one. Like 30 days later, whatever it was, we finished that scene later, and it just was this kind of funny, like, it's just how it worked. It was the way that the schedule fell for us. But yeah, that is definitely one of them. And I think it was through that I was going, okay, I have to trust you and what you're seeing from a light standpoint, because your gear. I don't know your gear, right? I know what my gear would have said. My gear would have been like, you don't have enough light. But then, there's the idea of knowing where your shadows exist. And I've always tried to light not based upon where the light's hitting, but where do I want my shadow? Where do I want my shadow? And if I have to have a light, what color, if a color, do I put on there? So that was one of those. We had these two very different scenes, right? We had this extreme sunlight, and then we went and we were like pitch black, and you will see that one because I did put that one in.
Okay.
Some of my I was like, I like that one. That was a good one, and it had the lens flares, which you were so gracious on.
Yeah, no.
Like, I love lens flares, and you're like, I got a solution for this, and it's everywhere. It's fantastic. We had to bring up lens flares at least once. It's Fragment. So,
no, it's there. You have part of the issue you have too is like when you go into a scene is where you're shooting at. The location is so important, and I know we had one room that we had white walls, and like, okay, how do we not have white walls? And that was just our time and budget and location we're at, and we're like, okay, how do we make this work? And it worked, right? Because there's a way you can use it, and but you had so many great places, and that day was there was so many great things we were able to do because of locations. And I think that should never be overlooked. If you can get a great location, try it, do everything you can. And then, I mean, the parking garage, and that was pretty far away from home base, right? But
very, very far.
I think that was our furthest distance away. It might have been, and but it was worth it, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It made all the difference in the world. And so
that's one of my favorite shots. You asked me, and I put that in there because I was like, it stood out to me on so many levels of just amazing, and the color of and it's the perfect example of when you have a really great location, and then taking advantage of what's there from a light standpoint, from a dressing standpoint. We didn't have to overlight that thing. That was so great. It was like, the lighting, the mood, everything was already there. We were just making sure our actors could be seen, making sure that they had, solid, a good shot, and then got out of the way. And it was really cool to see.
Yeah, that scene pretty much lit itself to a certain extent. Right? It was just, okay, make sure you land here, and the light, and that's it worked. Out. So
I've learned that location is probably one of the most important things I do, and that's why I location scout, because I want to see where it's going to take place, and then I change it. So we were in the caves, right? We had this massive underground environment, and the script called for it to be like an underground bunker. And I had this one vision in my head of what it was going to look like, and I spent forever trying to find something that would work. I was making every call I could, and then finally, God in his wisdom was like, you know what, you should try. And you should try Cave of the Winds, because I live in Colorado Springs. Cave of the Winds is just up the road. And I was like, they're going to say no, but I got a call. And I called and they were like, yeah, if you come in after hours, yeah, I think we can accommodate that. And they're like, you should come up and take a look at it. It's already got some lighting in there. There's some stuff. And I was like, no, that's perfect. That was a massive saving thing about us being able to film there, is we didn't have to use what light we didn't have to light it. It was already there. We were just augmenting it, and it turned out looking fabulous. It was amazing. It was freezing, but it looked really great in there, and that was all just location scouting.
Yep.
So yeah,
pulling gear in and out wasn't the funnest, but
no,
but you know, they had some lighting which helped, but we still had to light it, and there's some great that we could have shot so much more in there, right? It was just
so much.
Yeah, yeah. So season 2, let's go back.
It's some more underground. Yeah, I like it. I'm sure Benji won't mind that sound at all, or everybody freezing. That was a hard week. That week we had snowstorms and freezing cold weather, and then it was burning hot all in one week, and it was like, we're in production on Fragment. It just became, this is Fragment. That's what it is. It was just it was just tough. So Jared, what was one of your favorite scenes to score without spoiling anything? If it's in the trailer, you can talk about it because everybody's seen that, but okay. Nothing from episode 6 for sure.
Nothing from episode 6.
Yeah, well, from the story standpoint.
Well, my favorite cue is in episode 6, but
yes, talk about
it. What did you say?
So talk about it.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess I can say this without giving it away. The end of episode 6 flows very well, and it's got the edit and the shots have a rhythm to them. And so as everything's, it's the finale, so everything's coming to here, and I finally got to do what I always wanted to do with a particular character's theme that I was just waiting for the whole series to be able to do. Because like that sequence, I told you this when I started writing it. When I read the script, I was legitimately scared because I felt like, I was like, we've grown to this point and it's got to pay off. And if I do the score the way I want to, a very like Williams-esque, emotional with like a Zimmer action feeling, then it'll have built all the way to here and it's got to pay off. So I started writing that because I got episodes 5 and 6 at the same time. So I started writing that before I wrote anything in episode 5 and wrote that cue through the whole course of, it was the last cue I finished, but it was the first one I started on those 2 episodes. But that was my favorite just because it flowed really well. The storytelling with the shots was really good. And how it was filmed. Like there's this one particular shot that just lingers like longer than you would expect because it's trying to show like what just happened as something changes and people have to change plans and stuff. And it just worked really well. Like it told itself already without any score. So I just got to highlight a lot of it. So that was really fun. And the other sequence is your favorite cue because that whole sequence just works so well.
Yeah.
And so that one was a blast to score.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that one.
Yeah.
Like as soon as I start to hear the score, I'm like, oh, something's going to happen. So that's one we'll look at next. We did have a question. Mike talked about there are a few Christian sci-fi TV and film productions releasing soon. Is there an audience demand already, or is this experimental? I think it's an interesting thought process. Which comes first? I think in the space that we're working in, I've been saying for the last couple of years that science fiction is the next big genre in the Christian film space to explode. Because it gives us room to explore allegory and metaphor. It's kind of like, I think once science fiction feels comfortable, we'll get more fantasy elements that exist. I think we've been very conservative as an industry to just tell stories that everybody's comfortable with. Will they sell? Do we know them? But I think the demand is people are going, yeah, but I want to see some of these other things. I want to see stories expand and grow. And that's why I'm actually working on a concept for another science fiction that would be absolutely gigantic. It would take multiple films to do. So buckle in, boys. We got work to do. And I'm excited to see where the industry goes. Hopefully we can start continuing to expand the genre and not just think that Christian film is a genre, but instead that it's the message, and that we can put that message in all these other genres and explore them and tell these really great, heartfelt, redemptive, Christ-centered stories in whatever genre that people like. It's like going to a buffet. I want my story in with this flavor, and so I'm hoping that Fragment, Vindication's another great one. Guardians is one that's on PureFlix. There's shows that are trying to be like, yeah, we can push through this barrier of it has to look a certain way and still tell really great stories, and in a dynamic, artful, cinematic fashion that doesn't rely on just the standard cheesy elements. So next week on Soapbox with Mr. Nathan, I'll talk about. But I've got another question that came up: Is sci-fi is your favorite genre? I love sci-fi for the potential of what it gives us. Again, it's the idea of metaphor and allegory that I think it's missed way too much. Like Chronicles of Narnia is amazing. C.S. Lewis was brilliant. He has a science fiction trilogy, that's like, these are brilliant. And it just gives us the realm to be able to explore more, I think. But that's my personal opinion. So there's that. All right, let's dive into some of this. So I wanted to show outside of just the trailer moments, but there are some other moments, some things that have stood out to me from Adam's work that I wanted to look at, just because it's so pretty. It's so pretty. So I put some of my favorites. The truth is this could have been as long as every episode, because every episode is fantastically shot. So it's like, I just wanted to pick a couple, but
I'll pay you later. I'll pay you.
Yeah. So let's watch that, because I think it'll be cool. It's just so good. There's so many. Like I could have put in so many, but that last frame is especially the one that I think it's one of my top 5 favorite frames and moments is just that the character of Harrison Arlo standing alone in that parking garage in front of like, it just feels like Fragment. Like if I were to say what feels like Fragment, that feels like Fragment more than probably anything else we shot.
My favorite shot was in that. And like, so my favorite shot is the push in on Araya. When she's going through the door, about to walk through the door, because that is such a huge story moment. And the way it's slightly underneath, right? So it makes her look a little heroic. She turns around with that expression and you're pushing in. And then the shot of the door closing and the symbolism of that door closing on who she was before is so good. It's I just loved it so much.
Yeah.
Well, I think that speaks to the collaboration that Nathan and I got to have on this. And Nathan has a lot of great compositions in his head that he will say, "Hey, let's try this," or "What I was thinking this," and then put the camera there and like, "Oh, you may have to move it here and there a little bit more to get it right." But that was so great about working on a Fragment, was having that collaboration with Nathan. And then I would say just being on a faith-based project that when I talked about this on an interview we did prior, and I loved praying every morning and then pray over meals, and we know what's important, and I think it shows in the work and the amount that everybody we worked with, we just gelled, and that's the best experience I've ever had. And so the hardest part was being away from family for a long period of time, but that was tough, but everything else was great, was amazing. Driving through the snow, I'll do it again. I don't care.
Season 2, you'll just bring your family out, right?
Yeah.
Right. Then that'll be better.
No, and I think I 2 days. We'll do 5 on, 2 off, and then I can. And but I hope I think my probably that day when it snowed in on us on that, and we kind of had to change gears, and we'll just work for the the story in that episode, and just Isabel and Seth in that room, right, and just the flashlights and how do we light this, and there's a great shot that I think it's in the trailer where it kind of ends on them, and that flare just kind of highlights, and I'm like, man, this is almost like a movie poster right here in this one shot. And then trying to get the light to work when they're coming inside from the snow, and we get the frosty to work, and try to figure that out, and then go outside and actually shoot it, and shoot the snow coming down. That was fun. And what's funny is we talked about this, is like all of the first original Fragments, so much of that I did with just a flashlight and a piece of like broken styrofoam, because I was like, that's when we were working through those scenes. It was like, just make sure you use your flashlight and hit a couple of these key spots, because that will do all the lighting for you. As opposed to overlighting it, it was allowing the flashlight to do it, and make the scene feel the way that it should feel. So that was an interesting, and then going into that little, foyer seems really big for what that little space was, but I can't think of anything. Enclosed porch is even still too big. And we went through like, I think 2 or 3 different lighting setups, and we'd look and be like, man, it feels too moonlight, or it feels, this doesn't feel right, or this isn't. And then we found it. We're like, oh, that's it. Don't change anything. That's it. That's the one. Don't. It's like, don't move.
Yeah, exactly. Don't change nothing.
Yeah.
So I was going to give you this because it's got to make you feel good. That's great score makes your show feel twice as big. I agree. Right. It was between the score and the visuals. Like some of these things they couldn't show because they gave too much away. But there's some moments we caught that were just gigantic, right? Like we were at this location where there's this in Castle Rock, Colorado, they have this old wall that used to be a dam, and it broke, and it's just this giant feature. And I was like, the way we captured that, and the way that you showed that in one of these cool, like, Old West showdown type moments, is just, it's so cool to see, and it's so huge. We had scope on some of these things that were gigantic, not just trying to make a small room look big, but how do we make this already beautiful space even bigger? And then you combined that with the score, and it just felt like this is way bigger than it should be, but it's really cool. And it's one of my things I love about it, is how large it was.
Yeah.
Or his, I guess, is the best way to say that.
Yeah.
Here's another wonderful score compliment. I agree with Mike. The score puts you on the edge of your seat. You anticipate something big is happening or getting ready to happen. That's probably the best way to describe how we made Fragment. Was like, how do we don't want anybody to have a moment of rest. There's no rest in Fragment. There's no moments of like, oh, this is all fine, it's all good. Even the moments that you think are that way are followed up with these moments of intensity or loss or whatever.
Like there really isn't. The Fragment moves so fast. And any moment where it looks calm, it was almost like the goal is, well, that's because this is foreboding. It's not calm.
Yeah.
So,
something horrible is going to happen soon.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yep.
You know? So because we talked about it a little bit earlier, I just wanted to, as we kind of wrap up, you, Adam, you used is it called a streak filter? Is what you used when we were doing those to get those lens flares. So there it is. There it is. And because when we talked, I was like, I would love to shoot anamorphically, right? Because that's my dream.
Oh, there's there. You kind of see there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
as you turn it, get the horizon and stuff.
So we used that anytime we had hard sources of light to kind of create that flare feel without having the anamorphics. And it was, I mean, I remember Samuel and I, we'd just look at the monitor and we'd both just be like, it's so cool. It's like the coolest things ever. And we would just try and come up with ways of like, what else can we shine into the and then it would be too much, right? We'd show up and be like, we can't use that here now. It's too much. It's all you see is the streaks and flares. It's killing us.
There's a few times we pulled back and said, okay, let's pull it for this shot. Yeah, it doesn't make sense that it's not in here because it's in the other shots, but there's a few times where like, okay, we can't have it here.
Yeah, we can't see anything. But I think about that shot in the parking garage, that filter just, it sends that whole thing over the edge of being not just it looked good, but now it's storytelling on such a level that you wouldn't think that a streak filter would be. But man, I learned the filter lesson of like, you can use that to your advantage. It's not everything, but man, if you can push it over the edge, what a difference that would make.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's what's fun. It's being creative. It's come up with an idea to help tell that story. And, to me, that does add that sci-fi-ish feel to it, right? So
it really does.
Right. Yeah, no, and that was one of the things, right? It was, I get asked, is it a science fiction? I'm like, maybe a little. It has elements, and every time we would talk about it from a creative standpoint, I was like, it's science fiction-ish, is in that it's set in the not too distant future, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have any of the science fiction elements that you would look at in terms of extreme technology or any of that sort of stuff. So I wanted it to touch the science fiction because it wanted to look a certain way, and that was definitely one of the huge things that did that, was that little filter that we would change in and out every so often, and you'd be like, Oh, is it straight? We need somebody to go run out front and hold their phone flashlight so that you can make sure that the filter is horizontal. Otherwise, it'd like be off just a little bit, which was the worst.
I did see, I was on a big show the other day, streaming show or something like that, and they actually put a diagonal, because like a cell phone streak sometimes automatically does that, goes at an angle, but they were intentionally doing the streak filter at an angle, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's their stylistic choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we used it well. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
We got our money's out of it. Money's worth out of it.
Yeah.
You darn right we did. And every little bit of equipment and gear we could. So I'll tell this story because my daughter still she felt bad until I showed her the pictures you sent. So Adam carried this big 4x4 piece of styrofoam, and it was this giant bounce. And we were at the location in Castle Rock, and she's trying to carry it. And a gust of wind comes, and it snaps it in half. And she just feels, she's like, right? She's like, it's my fault. She feels terrible. Adam's like, it's no big deal. It's whatever. And it ends up being this cool, like, actually, this may be better now that it's broken. And we start putting in, be like, yeah, we called it the Kayla bounce. That's my daughter's name. We're like, yeah, we need the Kayla bounce. It'd come in and it would fold it. It would stand itself up, or it would fold just the right way. You only needed half of it. And it became this perfectly timed, happy accident, if you want to call it that way.
Yeah. So it's $20 at phone. It's insulation foam board. It comes in 8x4 and $20 at Home Depot. And so I when I came back, I got home, I went and bought some more to replace it. And this time I actually cut it in half and then put a hinge on it so I could have that. So I call it the Kayla. Nice. And so I've used it several times. It works. So
that's great.
I was glad it was that one. Did you have any major equipment failures, like breaks on set?
I don't think so. I mean, there's close calls,
Like when Jonathan almost takes out half the crew driving a car right at the camera. Yeah, that was a close call.
And I mean, there was times that things got a little crazy, but it wasn't necessarily us. So it wasn't necessarily our doing, but I loved it. I loved my experience with it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So
that's good.
Show and to your friends and family.
So this one comment perfectly sums up set life and this particular person. Samuel Joshua, who is our AD, Kayla Bounce 2.0 instantly improved Adam's work from 100 to 110.
I will say this. What was really cool for one of my experiences was I was living in a condo with Sam and Benji, and that was just a great experience in itself. And so love those dudes. They're awesome.
Yeah. I really liked the crew on this so much, from in production and post. It's been such a wonderful experience for me to just be like, I can trust, I can now dive further into my creativity without having to worry about limitations on things. So, So I'm going to put this one up there. Jared's mom showed up, so I got to put something up there. And this is the only one that didn't have to do with Jared being amazing and cute. So we'll put this one up there. What a great idea. I think we're talking about the streak filters, and what a help for upcoming filmmakers and those just interested in the process, and with a thought behind it. And I think that what's interesting about that is Fragment is definitely one of those things when you watch it, it'll look big, but it was done on such a small basis in production. We had to work really well with what we had. It was expanding what we had, building on what we were working with, and doing it in, sometimes it was a broken piece of styrofoam. Sometimes it's like the perfect lighting. There would be times where we'd be like, I'm not quite sure if it was going to work, but we're just going to trust that God put us here like a giant snowstorm. And we got done with that thing. And I'm like, the texture that was added to this because of where God had put it, is something we wouldn't have been able to write even in. But yet here we are, and we made it work. And it's one of my favorite memories. It's one of my favorite days on set was just dealing with, 12 inches of heavy snow and what that did for the location, the way it looked, and the fact that we went and got really good pizza for dinner. I was like that. One of my favorite days was that day. So I guess that's my note. It would be, don't let budget be the limiting factor. Turn around and figure out a way to maximize that. Find people like Adam and Jared who are really good at what they do and believe in telling stories, and let them do their thing. And, allow God to do his, right? To step out of his way. As we finish up, because this is the longest one we've had, I figured it would be, because we all get to geek out a little bit about what we're doing. Oh, yeah. If there's any final questions, please get those in, and I'll try and get those asked as quickly as possible. While we're doing that, remember that Fragment Oblivion comes out on PureFlix, streaming exclusively on PureFlix. It starts March 16th, which is Mark and I figured that out. That's John 3:16. The message of the whole show and John 3:16 just feel so perfectly intertwined. It was just a really cool moment. So 3:16, go watch it. You can get your subscription. Tell them if you're getting a subscription because of Fragment, because that's always good for them to know. Share all the stuff you possibly can. You don't understand how important it is that people share. They talk about the show, share the trailer, share these lives, whatever information, and tag PureFlix in it, because the more audience that we get, the more it is that we get to do another season. We get to continue to tell this story, because there's 3 or 4 seasons here that I feel like we really want to share and get out. So if you can help us, that would be huge. So all right, here's a question for Adam. Who makes the streak filter?
A lot of people. So that streak filter was pretty inexpensive, but I've tested quite a few, like the rainbows from Schneider, and then one I did recently is a glassless filter, and it's a frame that's got the elements that create that streak in it, and that one's great because if you drop it, it's not going to break. But I think that's the Air Flare from Golden Age Labs. So there's a lot. The price range varies from $50 to $400, and it just has to do with quality and things of that nature. But ours didn't cost too much, so it was pretty inexpensive, and it did the job well. So
extremely well.
Yeah, and I think that's test. That's what I was told by a mentor of mine, and just go out and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and use it for your advantage. So
yeah.
No, that's great. So Jared, what system do you work on? What do you score in? How does your system work?
So my system is I work in Logic. I write it all in Logic, which is Apple's version of something like Cubase or Pro Tools, basically. The computer's an iMac, and pretty much almost all the sounds in Fragment are not live. They're all samples from a company called East West. So, which costs like $20 a month, so it's dirt cheap, but you can do things like that. As long as you really learn how to use the tools that you have, you can create some really good stuff out of them. And there's a couple other sounds like I'm singing a lot in this score, believe it or not, making super weird vocal sounds into this microphone right here. But yeah, that's pretty much the system in this tiny little room, all by myself, having a blast.
You do sound good, by the way. I can tell the difference. Right? It's got the
thanks.
Good baritone voice.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Whatever. He's just showing up. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm the sound guy. It's got to sound good. To be honest with you, Jared's has got to sound good. Adam's has got to look great, right? So he lit his interview. I lit my interview, and just hope that it sounds all right. I mean, we wouldn't be who we were if we didn't make this look and sound as great as we could, right?
That's true.
I had it, but it was kind of affecting the frame, so I took it off. But
Nice.
it looked pretty. I was like, hey, this works.
All right. Guys, thanks for hopping on. This was a lot of fun. I
Sure.
actually enjoyed this a lot, just being able to talk about the making of Elements. Again, everybody, please go watch and share. That means more than you can possibly imagine. And then watch out. If you guys, let me put this up there too, because I need to. You guys want to hire Adam when he's not working on my projects, you can follow Adam on Instagram and Facebook. He posts some really cool stuff on Facebook because he's a photographer, but he likes to take really amazing photos from his phone. Oh, that was the other one that I was going to say. That was one of those fun, creative moments on set where we're trying to get the security footage from our science fiction basis of like a car boot. And we needed it to look a certain way. We weren't going to get the camera down there. So we went with a cell phone. And it's mounted in that spot. So it looks right. And if it wasn't a cell phone, it wouldn't have worked as well. Like, honestly, the cell phone look felt better than any high dollar camera would have. It just had the right look and feel to it. So yeah, that's one of my favorite low tech hacks that we ended up using a couple times, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Jared's on Instagram and Facebook. You guys can follow him there. He's looking at putting some videos together of how he arrived at certain cues and things like that in Fragment, which would be really cool. And then I think you're going to probably end up releasing a Fragment score album eventually, right?
Oh yeah,
because that'll be amazing. I get one for free though, because
yes, yes, you can get one for free.
That's how that works. Okay, that was all I needed. That's all I needed from that. All right, guys, thank you for hopping on. Thank you guys for hanging with us this long. And again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out at any moment. We'll answer them because we like to talk about it. Watch Fragment, and then we'll have another one of these next week. Otherwise, I will be at Christian Worldview Film Festival singing the praises of Fragment and my cast and crew. So until next time, we'll see you.
See you later.